in the economic environment and where the city stood at that time, there was no longer a need for a stabilization plan and for us to focus more on identifying future revenues and expense trends. So this next slide will show an executive summary of the next 5 years, FY23 to FY2027. And I just want to talk a little bit about how this part gets developed. On the projected revenues, we do take a look at some of our internal forecasting models. We also engage with Deloitte, as we have for the last couple of years, in developing revenue projections with COVID impacting our revenue streams. So our focus here today has a lot sharper focus on FY 2023 because we have begun some discussions with departments. And on the expense side, you'll see that we are projecting about $740 million. So those discussions have been had. We do solicit from the department information from them around their contractual obligations, any initiatives that they see coming forward in the next 5 years. So if I bring your attention to the bottom line net general fund impact, again, FY 2023, we're having a lot of discussion about that now. We think there may be a gap of about $5.8 million, which we will address in further conversations with council, with the administration, to close that gap. The unfunded identified needs are, again, we solicited from the department some of their initiatives, priorities that they would like to see get done over the next 5 years. Gives us a little bit of insight into what they're thinking about implementing. But of course, they're not funded at this time and require further discussion. We've included those in an appendix at the end of the presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to Chief Davis to go into a little bit more detail on the revenue side.
Thank you, Dr. Wilson, and good morning, council members. I'm Chief Davis. I will be giving you a overview of the general fund revenues for the FY23 5-year plan. We began the development phase of constructing the 5-year plan. The Office of Revenue collaborated with Deloitte Consulting in reviewing various revenue models, independent analysis, leading economic indicators, and historical data. And through this research, a comprehensive plan, as you see before you, was developed that exhibits a positive growth over the next 5 years, with the key assumption that the revenues negatively impacted by the pandemic will fully be recovered during such time frame. This assumption is consistent with encouraging trends to some of the city's more economically sensitive revenue sources, such as property, sales, and hotel-motel taxes, which are having significant recoveries since the peak period of the pandemic. We are anticipating an average revenue increase over the entire 5-year period of 3.2% for property tax, 5.5% for sales tax, and 18.1% for hotel-motel tax. As you can see on the bottom portion of the screen before you, the overall fund projected revenue ranges from $734 to $794 million, which equates to a growth of 1.2% to 4.1% annually, and it includes an estimated inflation of 2.4% from FY24 through FY27. And as shown in columns 3 and 4, which are titled FY23 projection and FY24 projections. These are our largest year over year, and this is due primarily to the conservative approach that we took with the development of the FY22 budget. Overall, the general fund revenues are forecast for the forecasted period assumes a rapid recovery beginning in FY23. As you can also see from the screen, There are a total of 11 revenue categories in the general funds that contribute to the overall 5-year plan. However, I will highlight on 4 core revenue categories that are contributors and 3 specific categories of significance in the development of the FY23 5-year plan. In regards to the 4 core revenue categories, the largest revenue category is property tax that has a projected revenue growth ranging from 1.4% to 6.7% annually over the next 5 years. Property tax has been a stabilizing force throughout the 2 years of the pandemic. This is attributed to rising property values from the market's demands and new construction. Thus, housing prices are projected to increase by 6% in the Atlanta metro area. And this also will be an addition. There also is an addition of increase in the commercial pricing throughout 2022. The second category is the local option sales tax, with a projected revenue growth from 1.2% to 19.7% annually over the forecasted period. Sales tax has been a welcome surprise despite the declines in revenues experienced during the pandemic. And thus, this growth in sales tax is projected to continue to exceed expectations and become a major contributor to the city's current economic recovery following the pandemic. Our third category is the public utilities, alcohol, beverage, and other taxes. This revenue category will see an increase due to the outstanding performance of the title ad valorem tax from rising automobile sales pricing and alcohol by the sales tax from removal of the COVID restrictions on restaurants. We are projecting the revenue growth range from 1.4% to 23.4% annually over the next year starting in FY23. And our fourth major contributor is license and permits, which contains the business license and building permit revenues. The business license revenues in FY23 are projected to continue to recover from businesses improving their financial positions after the pandemic, as well as building permits revenues are projected to remain stable and correlate with the residential and commercial real estate market. Thus, staff is projecting the revenue growth ranging from 0.2% to 3.2% annually over the 5-year forecast horizon. And now, related to the 3 specific categories that are projected to see an immediate impact from the pandemic, the first category is other revenues, which contains miscellaneous citywide revenues such as investment income and revenue from sales of city assets. We are forecasting an initial decline from FY22 to FY23, which is due in large part to the uncertainty of receiving federal subsidies beyond FY22. Thus, our projected revenue growth is now from 0.6% to 3.9% annually starting in FY23 throughout FY27. Our second category is hotel motel, which is derived from an 8% occupancy tax on hotel guest rooms and short-term rentals within the city limits. This general fund total represents the city's allocated share of the hotel motel tax, which is approximately 25%. After 75% is distributed by the city to the Atlanta Convention Bureau, the Georgia World Congress Center, and the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. This revenue is projected to show rapid improvement now that the pandemic has become manageable and travel restrictions have been lifted. Thus, we are projecting a revenue growth from 0.5% to 83.9% over the next 5 years. And our final category of significance is the fines and penalties, which is comprised primarily of traffic and parking fines. This revenue category is forecast to see improvements due to the resumption of parking citations enforcements and the reopening of the city courts. Projected revenue growth from FY23 to FY27 ranges from 1.1% to 190% annually over the 5-year forecast horizon. Once again, the large year-over-year increase occurs in FY22 to FY23, and this is primarily due to our conservative approach in developing the FY22 budget during the pandemic. As you can see, a thorough consideration has been given in the development of the FY23 5-year plan, and most of our revenue categories are projected to see rapid improvements since the peak period of the pandemic. Overall, we are projecting the forecast to the city to be more positive to the economics going forward. I will now turn the next presentation over to the Budget Chief, Charles Bell.
And while he's coming to the podium, I do want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Council President Shipman. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, Finance Exec Committee. Again, my name is Charles Bell. I serve as the Budget Chief in the Finance Department's Budget and Office of Budget and Fiscal Policy. As we take a look at the expense side of the 5-year plan, I want to state that the budget's total movement is expected to grow about $83.7 million from FY22's budget adoption over the 5-year period ending FY27. Movement into fiscal year 23 is projected to be an increase of about $29.9 million over the adopted budget of FY22. This, in and of itself, is a clear indicator of the city's path, meaning on the road to recovery. We want to emphasize the fact that this forecast is void of any federal subsidy. The use of the $30 million, $29.9 million in the first year will include but not be limited to some mayoral initiatives. As a brief highlight, some of these include wage increases for frontline workers, public safety personnel, at Promise Youth Center's operations, and special parks and recreation operations and maintenance. In general, the Office of Budget and Fiscal Policy reviewed key expenditure trends, taking into account salaries and benefits, which would include those key wage increases, benefit adjustments, taking into account health insurance, and we hope that we can eliminate an annual financial deficit performance. A review of trending contracts, agreements, fuel repair, utilities, and debt. And then, of course, we took into consideration the gross domestic product, GDP, and applied it to other areas as we looked at escalations across the board. The report utilized was Statista, who is a company that specializes in GDP outlooks. Financial movement into FY23 illustrates again that $29.9 million increase, which, as you see on the slide at the bottom there, 4.22%. Another $24.1 million, 3.26% into FY24. Our growth begins to taper off, dropping into single-digit millions of $9.6 million and $9.2 million for FY25 and FY26, respectively. And then we tape up just a bit to $10.9 million for FY27. All in all, the average growth over the 5-year period is about $16.7 million a year, and that equates to 2.26%. As we take a look going down the left side of the slide, personnel services and employee benefits, we will realize an increase in personnel expenses from FY22 to FY23 by approximately $11.8 million. And that's due to pay increases of roughly $6 million spread amongst public safety, transportation, information management, parks, and 311 customer service. Another $2.5 million is scheduled for investment into funding for additional police positions. Increases in health and pension costs will also play a role. Purchase contract services Here, they are forecasted to run roughly $8.8 million greater in FY23 as compared to FY22. The Budget Office requested what we refer to as contract obligations listings from departments. The report focuses on active contracts and is to address tenure, highlighting contract ending dates, particularly those that travel into the new fiscal year. This ask gives us a chance to see the amount of funds required to cover existing contracts. The Budget Office, in preparation for the upcoming fiscal year, as well as the 5-year plan, asked departments about prospective major program changes for the upcoming 5 years. Oftentimes, these include activities considered to be major projects and may even eventually become capitalized. Some of the responses received, a short list, we have a couple of examples from fire, self-contained breathing apparatus, self-contained breathing apparatus at about $2.8 million in fiscal year 24. Portable radio systems, $1 million per year for 5 years. Looking at what the Department of Planning submitted, they have a housing innovation lab, about $350,000 annually. Parks, new park land ranging from $2.2 million to $6.2 million over the 5 years. Summer camp operations looking like about $2.3 million a year over the next 5 years. And last but not least of our sample, the Department of Transportation. They included Atlanta Streets Alive event management contract, which is going to be about $3 million a year. The supplies expenditure category. The major accounts within this category definitely include utilities, gas, water, and electric. We collaborated with the Department of Enterprise Asset Management, who shared with us rate increases, particularly coming from Georgia Power, which would be just under 5%. We did not recognize any changes coming from water. However, when taking everything into consideration, some of the other accounts would include consumable supplies, small equipment, furniture and fixtures, catering, subscriptions, and the like. An overall 5-year average was about 1.24%, and that is consistent with the GDP forecast referenced at the outset of this expense presentation. The same can be said for capital outlays, which will continue with the maintenance costs of about $5 million for body-worn cameras, and begin picking up the cost for a new parkland project. As you look at the slide, you'll see a little bit of a gap, a jump there going into FY25. Interfund interdepartmental charges is expected to be roughly, relatively flat based on containment efforts by the city, and may creep up just a tad in years 4 and 5. The charges take into consideration the indirect cost allocation plan and motor fuel and repair. We do recognize that fuel is on an uptick in terms of the horizon, in terms of what's happening here in the United States. We do have a meeting, I think it is tomorrow, to talk about FY23's budget, and fleet will probably, DPW will probably talk a little bit more about fuel. Other costs, well, we take into account items such as OPEB, other post-employment benefits, election expenses, and animal control costs. And costs are expected to hold fairly steady over the next few years. Then we turn our attention to debt service. Debt service, as you see, looking across the board for the 5-year period, you'll see some reduction there. Basically, that comes from 2 different issuances. Our bond series 2000A, Atlanta Fulton County Recreation Authority zoo bonds. We should be retiring that at the end of fiscal year 23, and that will come off of about a $3.1 million payment for principal. And then Revenue Bond Series 1998 COPS, Certificate of Participation in FY24, will be coming down of another $1.5 million. Conversion summary, we'll be working with the administration, putting forth a concerted effort to enhance the city's restricted reserves. As you look at the slide, you'll see we want to get up into the double-digit millions, and that would bode well for the city. And last but not least, other financing uses, an account group that we refer to, and for the most part is where we house our GMA lease payments in terms of how we handle our vehicles throughout the year. I'm happy to try to entertain any questions that you may have.
Say, CFO Ball, do you have any closing comments before we open up for questions from my colleagues?
Yeah, no, I just want to thank the team for their hard work and dedication to this, and I am, pleased to say that we are coming out of a significant downturn, and things are trending in the right direction. We're completely not out the woods yet, so we're still guarded with FY23, and we'd like to see those operational reserve balances increase. But other than that, I just want to thank the team and everybody for their efforts.
Thank you. All right, so we'll take questions from my colleagues. Councilmember Dozier, you're up.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Chairman Wan. I just had a couple quick questions. The first is with regards to the 5-year expenditure projections. I saw that there's roughly a 50% increase between fiscal years 24 and 25. Can you elaborate on what's driving that increase in capital outlays?
So we have received some information from the departments as it relates to what they foresee in the upcoming 5 years. One of the major increases came from parks, and they're looking to bring on some additional parkland in those outer years.
Okay. And then my other question, we've been doing this process since, it looks like since 2009, I believe it's when the ordinance was first passed. I know this gets updated every year, but how does our projection model look? How accurate are we when we look back 5 years? How do we do? I'm just kind of curious how accurate it's been. I know the pandemic has, thrown a huge curveball in terms of those projection models, but typically how do we look compared to what we've projected out?
It's really such a moving target. It is something that we look at and to change every year. What we do find is that the first 3 years of data seems to be pretty close, but when you get out years 4 and 5, it's not as accurate because we just have more information that's closer to us in the next on a short-term horizon, especially when we utilize a lot of the forecasting models that we have. There's more closely related data in the closer years. So from how we're performing, the closer we are to that year, we do pretty well, but the further out that we project, we end up having to make significant changes in those outer years.
Thank you. That's all I have. I yield my time.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Dozier. President Shipman.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to ask a couple of questions. Was there an inflation rate over the course of the 5 years that was used in the projections?
Yeah, so we used the CPI index. It was about 2.4%. 2.4% we used in the inflation rate over the course of the year. But we do also look at some of the revenue categories will be different. So property tax will have its own rate that we project out. Sales tax will have its own rate. I think we mentioned 2.3% in property tax, 5.5% in sales tax.
I want to focus on the expense side in the top two lines, the personal services and the purchase contracts. A couple of questions here. In the outer years, FY 25, 26, 27, the personal services only rise somewhere between 0.7% and 1.2%. That's both well below the inflation rate that you said was used, and also trend-wise seems like it's a significant decrease. Why the decrease in the rate of change?
The most significant impact on the personnel line item is that in FY23 and FY24, we are still accommodating the fire raises, and those will be finished. The raise will be finished in FY24. So we won't have as much of an increase in those outer years.
But I guess to piggyback on Councilmember Dozier's question, have there been times in the past in which our personnel costs have risen lower than inflation?
Council President Shook, yes, there have been when they've risen lower than inflation. As you know, as part of the annual budget adoption process, there's also a companion paper, which is a personnel paper. And in that personnel paper, there are considerations that are made for salary increases, adjustments, and the like. And there have been instances where no considerations have been made and inflation continued to go up.
Okay. A follow-up, in looking at the purchase contract services, those rates of change are higher than the personnel line, even in the out years, 2.2% in FY25, a little over 5% in FY26, almost 5% in FY27. Is there any implied relationship between these two, moving to more of a contracted model versus a personnel model that can be read into this, or are those unrelated?
Well, how we develop the purchase contract services line is we go through an exercise with departments to have them outline for us current contracts they have on tap, they're obligated to, and things that they see in the foreseeable future. So those numbers will fluctuate based on information that we receive, that they may have an initiative that's coming forward that will require a contract to be put in place.
So I'm just close with a comment. The purchase contract of services line feels like that it's more in line with what I would expect. The outline personnel services projections seem incredibly conservative and optimistic to me. So I would just make that as a closing comment.
Thank you, President Shipman. Other questions or comments from my colleagues? What I will add to CFO Ball's comments, too, is that the personnel paper also, not only if there was a flat salary piece, there's also my favorite topic, funded vacant positions. If we abolish those, we'll actually reduce the personnel line item as well. And so I'll be looking at those this year. Get ready.
Absolutely.
Other questions or comments? The one thing I will add, I do want to thank those that were on council in 2009, so Councilmember Shook, for instituting this tool which is great during fiscally turbulent times, particularly when the city is under financial duress. What was that? Closer. Okay. What I will say, though, is in good times like this, or safer times, more stable times, to your point, sometimes that 3-4 year out forecast may not be necessarily as informative or illuminating as we might need at the time. So one of the things I'll float to y'all, and we can explore this as we go, is that maybe we revisit this and make this a tool that is triggered by certain events that indicate financial stress. So, dipping into the reserves, or if we are anticipating, and collectively with the administration, things that are coming down the pike that we would need to quickly put in a 5-year plan, maybe limit the focus to a 3-year stretch, and then really dive into certain elements of it. So to Council President Shipman's point, salaries and personnel services, to Councilman Dozier's point, inflation, I think those are things that we could really investigate, and it would be a more meaningful exercise for us. So, but I do want to thank the finance team for the time you put into this. It looks great. Again, we're in stable times, and it's just something for us to consider going forward. So, other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you very much, CFO Ball and your team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so the next item we have under presentation is from Ms. Kenyatta Mitchell. However, I had said during briefing that I was going to go ahead and try and knock out our appointment confirmations if the appointees are here, so I'd like to do that. I understand that of the three, Mr. Pat Dixon. Mr. Dixon, are you here? Very good. Let's go ahead and dispose of this so that you can go on with your day rather than having to sit here while we do our presentation pieces. But I'll read the caption, the legislation in. It's 22-C-5034, communication from Mayor Andre Dickens reappointing Mr. Pat Dixon, Jr. to serve as a procurement appeals hearing officer on behalf of the City of Atlanta. This appointment is for a term of 2 years to begin retroactively on August 19, 2021 and expire August 18, 2023. Mr. Dixon, if you could, just please introduce yourself, tell us a little bit more about yourself and why you're interested in serving in this position, please.
Yes, thank you. I'm Pat Dixon, Jr. I'm a partner in the firm of Dixon and Dixon here in Atlanta. My son is a managing partner. I've been practicing law for 44 years, mostly in the city of Atlanta, in the surrounding areas, with very few vacations, I might add. I started in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission General Counsel's office in Washington, D.C., having graduated from Howard University Law School in '78. I've been a part of many law firms in this city. During the course of my career, I served 10 years in the county attorney's office of Fulton County. I've also was general counsel for almost 10 years for the CI Squared Aviation, which is a top 25 aviation company in the country, managing contract towers throughout the country as well as the Caribbean. I served as special master for the Superior Court of Fulton County, dealing with real estate litigation. Been doing that for several years. I also been on the License Review Board for this city. I've served on this procurement board. I also am a member of the board of the Atlanta Housing Authority. My litigation, I have expertise in transactional work, having worked in procurement for CI Squared Aviation as chief procurement officer there. I also have done extensive litigation in civil rights, as well as catastrophic injury, as well as real estate litigation. I think that sums it up.
All right, thank you, Mr. Dixon. Does any of my colleagues have any questions or comments about this appointment? All right, there's a motion from Shook to approve, second by Bakhtiari. There's no further discussion. Let's open the vote, please, on this appointment.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, 6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Dixon.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, next item, let's go back to the presentation by Ms. Kenyatta Mitchell, the Intergovernmental Affairs Update.
Good morning, y'all. Thank you for having me speak before you today. My name is Kenyatta Mitchell, Director of Intergovernmental Affairs for the City of Atlanta in the Mayor's Office. And I wanted to do my second presentation before Finance Committee. It's been a busy session, so apologies for the delay in getting back to y'all. But first, I wanted to let you all know my office has doubled in size to 2 people. The other person we had hired is at the Department of Intergovernmental Affairs is DeAndre Everhart. He comes from the Biden administration. I'm so very grateful that he is working with me. He's going to be helping me with federal work, and he's actually in D.C. right now working on federal appropriations who passed yesterday. So in that note, let me speak really briefly about federal appropriations. So last night, President Biden signed the Omnibus Fiscal Year 2022 Appropriations Bill. In that, specifically for the City of Atlanta, are earmarked projects from our senators. One is the Beltline Southside Trail from Milton Avenue to Boulevard, which is segment 3. We got $5 million for that, which is huge. We have a project that was submitted by Senator Warnock, which really hot off the presses. We just found out about this one recently, went through, is the Atlanta Center for Diversion Services pilot, City of Atlanta reimagining the Atlanta City Detention Center. I know that's a very convoluted word, but that's the pilot for the detention center. We got almost $3 million, so $2.988 million for that project from Senator Warnock. So I'm very grateful to both of our senators for that. And also part of this for our downtown folks, Central Atlanta Progress is going to receive $1.16 million for the Stitch, which is the downtown cover connector project. So we're very excited about the potential of all of those things. It's rare for us to get earmarked appropriations for the federal government, so we're lucky for that. These appropriations are going to start being paid out in 29 days. The count starts today, so it'll be 29 days counting today. And this bill will fund the government through September 30th. We're going to have to come back and make sure the next budget year is paid for. We are going to ride the momentum of the current federal appropriations and start requesting infrastructure projects. I have my friend behind me, the commissioner, and both my friends in the departments. We're going to talk to them about some new projects for the city of Atlanta to ensure our water, sewer, and transportation is flowing appropriately. So we're going to ask for those very shortly. The next quick thing I want to talk about is we have a Supreme Court nomination. Judge Ketanji Brown is going to begin on March 21st. And hopefully the Senate will vote on that by April 8th, so immediately after the legislative session. Going on to the state, we always say that, some days nothing happened, and some days everything happens. Yesterday was one of those days. So we got our budget appropriation, and yesterday was crossover day. So the folks who don't know what crossover day is, it's a magical day in the General Assembly where if your bill does not cross over from the House to the Senate or Senate to the House, it is effectively dies. But we all know from working with the General Assembly, there could be zombie bills that could be resurrected, so nothing truly dies until that gavel is hit on April 4th. So right now we have 13 days remaining in the General Assembly. Qualifying for races happened last week, which marks the beginning of our statewide election cycle. So that means the games have begun as far as partisan legislation coming through the pipeline. And for the folks who are listening in the audience, Monday is the first day you can request an absentee ballot. So I want to make sure people understand and know that. In terms of the state budget, we've gotten some good things. House Bill 304 will save the citizens about 29 cents a gallon in the fuel tax, the motor fuel tax. We know with our war in Ukraine, gas prices have gotten outrageous, and the state is going to try to give us a little bit of comfort. The federal government is working on this as well. I do assume that the state tax will probably be removed first. So that will be 29 cents a gallon. That will last until May 31st. That sunset date allows the governor, if we are still having an issue with gas prices, to extend it. But we have to pass this bill for the governor to have that opportunity. I'm going to try to run through this fast. We have a lot going on, so apologies to everybody. They are also reworking the personal income tax exemptions. Right now in the state of Georgia, we have a state income tax, and the tax rate, the highest tax rate is 5.75%. They are trying to go down to 5.25%. For those who are following along, this is House Bill 1437, so if y'all want to keep an eye on that one. The fuel tax one is House Bill 304, if y'all want to follow along on that one. Has not passed out of the General Assembly yet, but both of those are still in the House. The amended fiscal year 2022, I'm talking about the state budget now, not the federal budget, but the amended fiscal year 22 budget includes more than $900 million in new spending. These are going to be one-time capital expenses, as well as $950 million in salary increases for state employees. We all know as city employees that there has been retention issues, and the state is trying to battle that with increasing salary. I am going to just say one more quick thing and open up for questions, because I know I said quite a bit here. Legislation has been introduced on that same vein to provide one-time tax refund checks to individuals between $250 and $500. That's a rebate for the excess of state taxes that have already been collected through the last year. So just to give you all an idea, a family of four with this new tax plan would pay no Georgia income tax if they make under $30,000 a year. A similar family making $50,000 would see tax liability drop by 28%. I will stop there and answer any questions that y'all have.
All right, thank you, Ms. Mitchell. We have questions from my colleagues. I see Councilmember Dozier. You have the floor.
Turns out masks and glasses don't play nice together.
They don't.
Good morning, Ms. Mitchell. Thank you so much for your presentation. Just wanted to ask with regards to the potential suspension of the gas tax. Are there any concerns about the impact that may have on state priorities for transportation investment? I know that we're scrounging for dollars locally to try to solve some of our transportation challenges, and I know many of us are advocating for stronger investment from the state. I'm just curious from your perspective, what you've seen at the Georgia Assembly. Are we at risk of losing transportation dollars in an unsustainable way by pushing forward with this suspension?
So that is an excellent question. It's funny that you asked that question because I asked that exact same question the last time. They did have a similar issue. So I'll tell you what I was told, which is when state taxes are based on a dollar figure. So each dollar that the gas price goes up, they collect additional revenue for that. We are almost, and I hate to use the word unfair, but we're receiving kind of an unfair windfall because of the increased dollar amount of fuel. So we've received so much of an increased dollar amount in fuel that we have collected far in excess what we would typically assume to collect if the gas prices were at a normal rate. So this is really just kind of buying down those additional funds that have been paid out because of the increase in fuel. But thank you for that question because I literally asked that same question before.
No worries, and I will just say that windfalls aren't always necessarily a bad thing. So, well, I know you don't work for the state, but just as you talk to our colleagues there to take that in consideration, we can get a lot of things done with these, even if the hit is hard for consumers, we can still make some positive happen.
I will definitely take that into consideration. Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Councilmember Dozier. Next is Mr. Winston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Mitchell, I just wanted to thank you for your hard work. I know it's been a very busy legislative session. Where my office sits, I've seen the many steps that you've been putting to go across the street. So just wanted to thank you, especially as it pertains to securing the funding for the southeast portion of the Beltline. So keep up the good work.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll let the mayor know that too. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Winston. Ms. Bakhtiari.
Hi, Ms. Mitchell. I know you haven't been doing much these past few weeks.
No.
I just wanted to know, well, one, thank you for everything, but wanted to ask if there was where the bill ended up yesterday, the anti-homelessness, well, I call it the anti-homelessness bill, that would essentially, the state was trying to force preemption laws on how we could spend our federal dollars to assist our unsheltered population, where that may have landed. Did it make it past crossover day?
It did not. So Councilwoman is referring to Senate Bill 535. Do not expect me to know all the Senate bill numbers, but I do know that one very intimately because I spent a lot of time with that one. Mm-hmm. It did not pass over with crossover day, but again, zombies can be resurrected, so we're keeping an eye on it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councilmember. Any other questions or comments from my colleagues? All right, thank you, Ms. Mitchell. Appreciate the update. All right, colleagues, that concludes our presentations, and will take us next to our regular agenda. Under communications, I'm going to, with no objections, I'm going to take numbers 1 and 3 together. The candidates are not here, and therefore we just need to move this forward with no recommendation on to Committee on Council. But item 22-C-5033, communication from Mayor Andre Dickens reappointing Mr. Jeffrey Saxby to serve as a procurement appeals hearing officer on behalf of the City of Atlanta. This appointment is for a term of 2 years to begin retroactively on August 19, 2021 and expire August 18, 2023. And 22-C-5035, communication from Mayor Andre Dickens reappointing Mr. Damian Denson to serve as a member of the Fulton County Library System on behalf of the City of Atlanta. Term limit is to be concurrent with that of the mayor. Can I get a motion? Our motion from Bakhtiari, second from Winston. Both is to move these forward with no recommendation. Please open the vote.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, 6 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries. These items will be forwarded with no recommendation to Committee on Council. That takes us to consent agenda, item H, ordinances for first reading. Ms. Kempson-Wright, if you will sound these for us, please. Or this one, rather.
22-0-1238, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee waiving the requirements of Chapter 2, Article 9, Division 1, Section 2910 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances entitled Grant Applications and authorizing the mayor, his designee, to apply for and accept the Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Fund Program Grant from the Criminal Justice Coordinating Council on behalf of the Mayor's Department of Immigrant Affairs and to amend the fiscal year 2022 budget in the amount of $10,000.00 to anticipate and appropriate Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Program grant funds in an amount not to exceed $10,000.00 and for other purposes.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kempson-Wright. So there's a first read, requires no action from us this cycle, and it will be before us at our next meeting. Okay, takes us to regular agenda item I, ordinances for second read. First item is 22-0-1191. Colleagues, we have a substitute for this paper in your packet. I will make a motion to bring forward, to amend with the substitute, as I read in the caption, a substitute ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to pay the outstanding invoice for Special Procurement Agreement SP 6647PL with Asset Works LLC on behalf of the Department of Public Works for services rendered during the term of July 1, 2021 through February 28, 2022 in an amount not to exceed $78,256.70 to authorize and approve payment in the amount of $34,780.76 for services to be rendered for the period of March 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2022, with all contracted work to be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account numbers listed and for other purposes. Can I get a second on the motion, please? Seconded by Bakhtiari. If there's no further discussion, let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. The substitute is before you.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Wiggins, if you'll tell us about this paper, and if you will also just highlight the substitute, if there are any differences from the original paper, please.
Good morning. My name is Steve Thomas. I'm the PMO for DPW, Office of Fleet Services. Again, the purpose of this substitute ordinance is to request approval by the Finance Executive Committee to authorize the Chief Financial Officer to pay the outstanding invoices to Asset Works for work performed on the Special Procurement Agreement, SP 6647-PL, in the amount of $78,256.70, and authorize and approve payments for $34,780.76 for services rendered during the term of March the 1st, 2022 through 30 June 2022. In 2013, the City of Atlanta, on behalf of the Department of Public Works, entered into Special Procurement Agreement 47-PL with Asset Works for the purchase and installation of radio frequency identification devices for the department in the amount not to exceed $790,212,783. The Department of Public Works and the Office of Fleet Services use the Asset Works to manage the city's motorized fleet of 5,292 vehicles and the distribution of approximately 3 million gallons of fuel. Asset Works has provided ongoing maintenance and support to the Department of Fleet Services pursuant to this agreement. The substitution was the additional invoices that we had to pay that were generated prior to coming to council during this particular time. So that's the actual increase in the dollar amount.
All right, questions from my colleagues? There's a motion from Mr. Shook to approve on substitute, seconded by Winston. I do have a question, though. So this is retroactive to July 1.
Yes.
So can someone walk me through what happened and where the lapse was in terms of timing on that?
Yeah, so the lapse, we were actually trying to work this legislation in tandem with special procurement. And so that we're still working through the special procurement process. So instead of delaying this legislation, we decided to go ahead and bring it forward.
Very good. Thank you, sir. All right, so we have a motion from Shook, second from Winston. Any further comments or questions? Seeing none, let's open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, 5 yeas, 0 nays. Motion carries. Item is approved on substitute. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right, next item is 22-01192, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to amend the FY 2022 Water and Wastewater Renewal and Extension Fund budget in the amount of $1,000,000 $36,889.00, and the FY 2022 DPR Ground and Site Trust Fund budget in the amount of $163,111.00 to anticipate and appropriate funds from a Westside Tax Allocation District grant approved by the Atlanta Development Authority doing business as Invest Atlanta to reimburse costs expended by the Department of Watershed Management and the Department of Parks and Recreation for environmental remediation work conducted at Rodney Cook Senior Park in historic Vine City and for other purposes. Good morning, Commissioner.
Hey, good morning, Chairman Wan, members of the Finance Executive Community. Makita Browning, Commissioner of the Department of Watershed Management. The purpose of this legislation is to appropriate eligible funds from the Westside TAD Allocation District Grant approved by Invest Atlanta to reimburse both the Department of Watershed Management, Department of Parks and Recreation for environmental remediation work completed as part of the Rodney Cook Senior Pond and Park project in historic Vine City community. The redevelopment of contaminated property is an important element in the implementation of several city planning efforts, including the Westside TAD redevelopment plan. Over the course of the project, Department of Watershed Management conducted environmental remediation of contaminated land and soil to remove dangerous contaminants and allowed the parcels to be safely redeveloped. The remediation work was completed in accordance with state and federal guidelines and allowed for completion of the project, which is a significant benefit to the city and residents of the community, including portions of the property that are operated by the Departments of Parks and Recreation as a public park. Subject to your questions, that completes my overview.
Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Motion from Shook to approve. Mr. Bond has a question, please.
I guess my question is that why are we reimbursing your department for work on which your department is chartered to do on behalf of citizens within the boundary of Atlanta? Why is TAD money that should be going to redevelop the community going to reimburse your department?
Well, again, as part of the Westside TAD, they set aside grant monies for remediation of contaminated property, and the property was contaminated, did have contaminated soils. To date, Department of Watershed Management has expended over $6 million, and so we saw fit to seek, reimbursement in some form for the amount that we put forth to remediate the properties and to support Department of Parks and Recreation in instituting the park amenity.
So that's $6 million out of the TAD that could then go to the broader community for other more altruistic purposes. I don't see the need for a city department to be reimbursed from this particular pot of money. I'd like to make a substitute motion to hold.
All right, so
more discussion can be had.
Substitute motion from Mr. Bond to hold. Is there a second for his motion? I do have a clarifying question before that. You said that the department has expended $6 million, but the TAD reimbursement is only this paper, which is $1 million, correct?
Yeah, that was the amount that was available via the grant.
And it's specifically for remediation, right? Which typically would not be from your budget.
Right.
Okay. Is there a second for Mr. Bond's? Yeah, but the motion to hold trumps that. So there's a motion to hold. Is there a second? All right, there's a second from Councilmember Dozier. All right, is there further discussion on this? I will add, though, I know that remediation projects, are above and beyond what we typically expect a watershed to do, and that there are funds that...
And they are, and we're continuing to, as we continue our work within that area, we're continuing to remediate other portions of properties,
right. So I'm not supportive of this motion to hold. I do think it's important. I appreciate Mr. Bond's comment, and I agree that in typical situations that we want as many TAD dollars going to kind of the specific purpose of a TAD, but in this instance, I do understand the rationale behind why this approach is being taken. Is there any further discussion or comments on? Oh, sorry, Mr. Bond. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with you that they ought to be reimbursed from some source. I disagree with the source.
Fair enough.
Okay. The TAD, and I'm the author of the Westside TAD, wasn't necessarily established for this purpose, and so those reimbursement grants are for targeted for people who are redeveloping property in that TAD, who want to take the many Brownsfields that exist in that area and convert them into useful property. I mean, this is a taxpayer-supported enterprise on behalf of taxpayers who live in that area, who are paying rates and taxes already. Why should we be reimbursed? You know, it's where it's coming from. That's the issue. And I would just like the time to discuss with the council member and others, and maybe there's an alternative to this action.
Any other discussion or on the motion? Again, the motion is to hold, made by Bond, seconded by Dozier. All right, if there's no further discussion, let's go ahead and take a vote on the motion to hold.
The vote is open. Councilmember Bakhtiari? Thank you. The vote is closed.
All right, 4 yeas, 2 nays. The motion carries. This item will be held. So thank you, Commissioner. Okay, next item is item number 7, 22-01193, an ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the City of Atlanta to amend the Second Amendment to lease agreement on behalf of the Department of Watershed Management with the Housing Authority of the City of Atlanta, Georgia, for the purposes of extending the term of the lease to June 5th, 2023 at an annual rent of $10.00, authorizing the mayor or his designee on behalf of the city to execute all agreements and instruments that the city attorney deems necessary to effectuate the intent of this ordinance, waiving the requirements of Section 2-1546 of Article 10, the Procurement and Real Estate Code of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances, and for other purposes. Please.
Thank you. I'm Mike Yergin. I'm the interim director of real estate for Department of Asset Management. This is a $10 annual lease extension in order for Department of Watershed to remain in its current location pending a negotiation of a land transaction that is pending approval by HUD. Once that is approved, then they would no longer need to be in this particular location.
Are there questions or comments from my colleagues? All right, there's a motion to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Winston. If there's no further discussion, let's open the vote.
The vote is open. Will everyone please vote?
Yeah, it's motion by Shook, second by Winston. The system is showing it needs a second.
We're going to take a voice vote. The system is having complications.
All right, so you're going to call for the vote?
Yes, I will.
Okay,
Councilmember Juan?
Yes.
Councilmember Winston? Thank you. Councilmember Dozier?
Aye.
Councilmember Bakhtiari? Aye. Councilmember Shook? Councilmember Bond?
Aye.
Thank you. The vote is closed. The item is favorable unanimously.
Was it 5 yeas, 0 nays? Motion carries. This paper is approved. Okay, the next two papers without objection we'll take together. It's 22-01199, an ordinance by Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari to provide for the annexation of property located at 1134, 1146, 1147, 1152, 1156, 1162, 1165, 1166, 1172, 1177, 1178, and 1185 Oakfield Drive, Southeast Atlanta, Georgia, and property located at 838, 842, 848, 854, 858, 864, and 868 Shadow Ridge Drive, Southeast Atlanta, Georgia, to the corporate limits of the City of Atlanta, Georgia 30316 pursuant to the 60% method to extend the boundaries of the Atlanta Independent School System, to notify the Georgia Department of Community Affairs of such annexation and for other purposes, And item 22-01201, an ordinance by Councilmember Liliana Bakhtiari to provide for the annexation of property located at 1163 Black Oak Drive, Southeast Atlanta, Georgia 30316, into the corporate limits of the city of Atlanta, Georgia, pursuant to the 100% method, to extend the boundaries of the Atlanta Independent School System, to notify the Department of Community Affairs and the state of Georgia of such annexation and for other purposes. There are companion papers moving their way through CDHS as well as the CDP process. Therefore, we need to hold these papers to wait for them to catch up. Ms. Bakhtiari, you've been busy. You want to put forward the motion to hold? All right, motion from Bakhtiari to hold. Is there a second? Second from Dozier. Let's open up that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. These items will be held. All right, so we're going to take items 10, 13, 14, and 15 as a block. There is a substitute first for 22-01114. I'll read in the caption and then make the motion to amend to bring forward the substitute, which is ordinance by council members Antonio Lewis and Jason Winston, as substituted by Finance Executive Committee, authorizing a donation in an amount not to exceed $5,000.00 from the Council District 12 distribution account to Daniel McLaughlin Thorell High School, Carver Early College, Booker T. Washington High School, and South Atlanta High School booster clubs, and for other purposes. Can I get a second on the motion to bring forward the substitute? Seconded by Shook. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. Motion carries. The substitute is before us. I'll go ahead and now read in the other papers. Item 13, which is 22-01217, an ordinance by Councilmember Matt Westmoreland authorizing a donation in an amount not to exceed $1,000.00 from the Post 2 at-large carry-forward account to the Atlanta Preservation Center and for other purposes. 22-01218, an ordinance by Councilmember Matt Westmoreland authorizing a donation in an amount not to exceed $2,500.00 from the Post 2 at-large carry-forward account to M.H. Mitchell, Inc. for the Guns Down mural campaign in Mechanicsville and for other purposes. And 22-01219, an ordinance by Councilmember Matt Westmoreland authorizing a donation in an amount not to exceed $10,000.00 from the Post 2 at-large carry-forward account to the Ben Massell Dental Clinic and for other purposes. Colleagues, any questions or comments on any of these papers? Okay, there's a motion from Shook to approve, seconded by Winston. The first item is on substitute. The last three are as is. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open.
At 6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. Those items are approved on substitute and as is, as presented. All right, item number 22-01215, an ordinance by Councilmember Michael Julian Bond authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to amend the funds allocated in the City of Atlanta's 2022 Infrastructure Bond horizontal and vertical projects list for City Council discretionary horizontal and discretionary vertical projects to appropriate funds for all 15 elected City Council members and for other purposes. Mr. Bond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to move approval of this. If all council members are equal, then we should share and share alike, and not only in our authority, but in our expenses and what we have available to us. There was an egregious error in the last bond issuance that only allowed 12 of the 15 members to have discretionary project income, and so this seeks to correct that going forward. So move approval.
All right, there's a motion from Bond to approve. Is there a second? Did you have a question, Mr. Dozier?
I have a quick clarifying question. I recognize that the bond amount is not changing in total. We're changing some of the allocations. So instead of 12 city council members getting a discretionary fund, all 15, for the monies for the at-large members, is that coming from the individual district budgets, or is this a separate bucket of money that we are pulling to support for at-larges to have discretionary monies?
The funds would be divided equally amongst all 15 members, would not come from your budget. It would come from the allocation that is proposed in the bond referendum. So instead of being divided 12 ways, it will be divided 15 ways.
Okay, thank you.
So CFO Bala, if we can get clarification on that, I believe right now the bond project list or proposal package includes $1.5 million for each council district, but none for the at-large, and it's 1.5. So what this would do is it would reduce that 1.5 down to 1.2 million, and therefore afford post 1, 2, and 3 $1.2 million that they could then allocate at their discretion. Is that correct?
Correct. The discretionary bucket total is, it's one total bucket, and right now it's divided over the 12 districts. This would not change the total discretionary amount, and it would rather divide that by 15 per council member instead of per council district.
And the other question I had is in terms of any impact on our ability to continue moving forward with project list. I believe if we were to try and open up the entire project list, it does affect our ability to be able to vote on it in May. Is that correct? Does this do the same thing or not?
No, this does not do the same thing, as the discretionary fund is already listed in the proposal to the public. If you were to change the bond list and add projects or delete projects from the bond list, that would impact the May referendum timeline.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Is there a second on Mr. Bond's motion? All right, seeing none, that motion we will not move forward. Is there a different motion?
Point of order?
Yes, Mr. Bond.
Mr. Chair, the council has never changed its rules to require a second in committee. Only the machines require a second. So the motion is appropriate.
Okay. Is that, Mr. President, is that correct?
Are you asking me for a parliamentary ruling?
Or if someone, council staff?
And the law department is here. I will just state that council and the committees are governed by their rules. A lot of them have been habitual. And so since the time of e-boardroom, the committees and the full council has always had a second.
Well, that's incorrect.
Is there someone from the law department? Well, I'm happy to second that, and I know how I'm going to vote on it. So it may, if you just want to make sure we have a vote, I'm definitely not in support of this motion. But if the law department, if there's someone here who can come and clarify whether we need a second or not for his motion.
Hi.
Or I'm going to actually, go ahead, Ms. Robinson.
Amber A. Robinson, City of Atlanta, Department of Law. It is accurate that typically and historically the committees would vote as to whether or not seconds, or would decide amongst themselves as to whether or not seconds would be required. However, I will advise that the Open Meetings Act does provide that the minutes of all meetings must include at minimum the names and members present at the meeting, a description of each motion or other proposals made, the identity of the persons making and seconding the motion or other proposal, and a record of all votes. It doesn't specify that a second is required of all votes, but it's indicated that second should be recorded.
I understand. Okay, thank you. I think I'm going to take a different tactic then. Colleagues, I'm going to make a substitute motion to hold. Is there a second on that one? Seconded by Shook. So discussion on the substitute motion to hold. All right, but yes, sir.
I don't have an objection with this, with the paper being held, because it begs a larger discussion. So if all council members are equal, they should be treated equal under the laws and policy of the city. And so if we're going to move forward with an instance where 3 of the 15 council members are not totally equal, then that begs the question for those of us who don't just represent 1/12 portion of the city and our budget allocation, that perhaps in this conversation that's coming, perhaps that we should have budgets that reflect our districts, which encompass the entire city.
Yeah, so fair point. I would also just add, I feel like the time for that discussion would have been in the previous council, which had the opportunity to have that discussion around
Well, Mr. Vaughn, I don't mean to cut you off, but that discussion was had at the last regular council meeting. I asked a specific question of the Bottoms administration, which actually led to some of the other papers that are held in this committee or coming forward in this committee. I asked a specific question of them because at a even earlier council meeting, when the bond referendum was discussed, I brought this issue up. And so as a follow-up question at the last council meeting in December, I asked specifically the deputy COO, I said, has this issue been rectified? And I was told positively that it had, that there would be an equal distribution between all 15 council members of these discretionary funds. And so this is something I've attempted to address, and this is the result of it. But I don't mind the paper being held because I would very much like to have a budget that reflects my entire district, which is the city, not just a 1/12 allocation that I share in the same amount with 12 other members.
Fair enough. All right, any further discussion on the motion to hold? All right, seeing none, let's go ahead and open that vote, please.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. Motion carries. This paper will be held. The next item is 22-01216. Colleagues, we have a substitute for that one, and I will read in the caption and then make the motion to bring it forward. An ordinance by Councilmember Michael Julian Bond is substituted by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to consult with the Atlanta Department of Transportation and the Department of Parks and Recreation to identify potential sources of funding for the Atlanta Student Movement Monument, the Martin Luther King Jr. Statue Pedestal, and the Vietnam Veterans Memorial Project, and for other purposes. So I'll make the motion to bring forward the substitute. Can I get a second, please? Seconded by Bond. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed. The substitute is before you.
All right. Mr. Bond, did you want to speak to the substitute, please?
Gladly, and thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the result of the part of the result or outgrowth of the previous conversation that we just had. Based on my experience in the last term, I pushed to have, with the previous administration, an allocation for the at-large members so I could fund these projects. Right? I was told at the last council meeting in December that had been done, that all 15 members would have a discretionary fund, not just 12 of the 15. When I found out that that was not the case, there's legislation that is held in committee now, I introduced to amend it because my fear was that these projects were not listed on the bond referendum projects and also would not be included in the bond covenant that goes along with the sale and the letting of the bonds. If projects are not in the bond covenant, even though they may be on our list, if they're not listed in the covenant, it would be illegal to fund them. And so I have two other papers that I'm going to ask to be filed that are inhaled. And I think it raised some concerns for the councilman for District 3 and the councilman for District 6 because they didn't have this history. And so, but I do want to note for the new members and for those who are coming over the new administration, it is illegal to come to that mic and to lie to the city council. And that is exactly what happened in December. A member of the Bottoms administration came to that mic, not once but twice, and lied to the city council. And so this is the result of that. I've spoken with the CFO on yesterday, and that's why we have the substitute here before us today. Because I thought if I could include these projects in the bond referendum list, this would be an easy way to get them accomplished. But that has not come to be because I was given very bad information. I was lied to, really, and a crime was committed in this very chamber by that person from that previous administration making that lie. And so this is an attempt to try to find the funds for these projects, and I'd like to move approval.
And there's a motion from Mr. Bond to approve on substitute. I'll second that. CFO Ball, I mean, I would imagine that while this instructs you to or authorizes you to talk with ADOT as well as Parks and Recreation. There may be other sources as well within the city that would be appropriate for projects such as these, correct?
Yeah, this will provide me an opportunity to provide an update to council if it is feasible to fund these projects and what the other sources might be. The original legislation to amend the infrastructure package, I could not advise to move forward with that legislation because it would put with the train that's already moving for a May referendum vote would have to derail.
Gotcha. All right. And just to close the loop, Mr. Bond, the CFO does know the dollar values of each one of the two projects, right? So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's been provided to him. You have that?
Yeah, we'll work with the council office and the departments to get the pricing.
So there's a motion to approve on substitute made by Bond, seconded by Juan. Is there any further discussion on this paper? Seeing none, let's open the vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries on this paper. Mr. Bond, I appreciate your taking this path on these two projects to continue keeping them alive. Okay, we've taken care of numbers 13, 14, and 15. All right, so it takes us to item 16, which is 22-01220, an ordinance by Councilmember Dustin R. Hillis authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to create a special revenue fund number 2752, Atlanta Beltline Special Service District, to deposit the ad valorem property tax receipts collected from the Atlanta Beltline Special Service District and amending the FY 2022 budget and subsequent annual budgets to account for the actual amounts collected from the Special Service District assessments and the required deposit of such amounts into the newly created revenue fund and for other purposes. Ms. Carr.
Good afternoon, council members. Yolanda Carr, Controller. So really, this is really a exercise in accounting. So we're asking for permission to create the fund. The Atlanta Beltline SSD was actually created last year. So really, we just need to go through the accounting exercise of creating the fund and collecting the revenues.
Any questions or comments from my colleagues? Any questions or comments? Was that a motion, Mr. Shuck? No. I heard a noise. I'll make a motion to approve. Questions or comments from my colleagues? Seconded by Winston. Any discussion on this paper? Seeing none, let's open the vote, please.
The vote is open. Councilmember Bond?
He stepped off the floor.
Oh, thank you. The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Carr.
Thank you.
Next item is 22-01221, an ordinance by Councilmember Michael Julian Bond authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to amend the fiscal year 2022 budget by adding to anticipations and appropriations bond proceeds in the aggregate principal amount of $3,420,000.00 in connection with the City of Atlanta General Obligation Bonds, Series 2021B, and bond proceeds in the aggregate principal amount of $188,500,000.00 in connection with the City of Atlanta General Obligation Refunding Bonds, Taxable Series 2021C, and for other purposes. Mr. Knight.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wan, members of the committee. Courtney Knight, Chief of Treasury, Debt and Investments for the city. This matter simply relates to the issuance of two series of bonds sold in December. Series 2021B was a $3.4 million general obligation bond for new money, and Series 2021C was a $188,500,000 GO refunding bond sold for the purpose of generating tax savings, interest rate savings for the city. We're merely asking for authorization to appropriate and anticipate the funds proceeds from these bond issues.
Questions or comments?
Answer any questions?
Yeah, questions or comments from my colleagues? Is there a motion? Motion from Winston, seconded by Shook. If there's no further discussion, let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. This item is approved. Next, we're now into J, resolutions. 22-R3250, a resolution by Council Member Liliana Bakhtiari, Michael Julian Bond, Matt Westmoreland, Jason H. Winston, Amir R. Faroki, Byron Amos, Jason Dozier, Alex Wan, Mary Norwood, Dustin R. Hillis, Andrea L. Boone, and Antonio Lewis, expressing the Atlanta City Council's support for Starbucks employees in Atlanta, Georgia, who are attempting to establish a union, and to urge Starbucks to accept the basic labor right of check card neutrality, and to urge the Georgia General Assembly to take legislative action to enable all Georgia workers the right to fight for competitive wages, benefits, and suitable workplace environments, and for other purposes. Ms. Bakhtiari, would you like to speak to your paper?
Yes, if I can find the button. Yes, this paper is simply for council to express support for food service employees being able to rally and fight for their own benefits, especially in a time where they face increasing stress and unfair working conditions. So I move to approve.
All right, there's a motion from Bakhtiari to approve, seconded by Dozier. Any further discussion on this? Seeing none, let's take a vote, please.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Bakhtiari. Next item is 22-R3254, a resolution by Councilmember Alex Wan adopting the 2023 update to the City of Atlanta 5-year financial plan for years 2023 through 2027 and for other purposes. Colleagues, we had a presentation of this at the beginning of the meeting. If there's no further discussions, I'll go ahead and offer a motion to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Dozier. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, let's open that vote, please.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. This paper has been approved. All right, the next item is 22-R3256. We do have a substitute for this. I'm going to read the caption and then make the motion to bring that forward, and then I want to acknowledge a couple of things, additional pieces, and then ask your consideration of the strategy going forward on this one. But it's a resolution by Councilmember Alex Wan, as substituted by Finance Executive Committee, requesting that the mayor takes into consideration and funds priorities that the Atlanta City Council recommends being included in the FY 2023 budget and for other purposes. I move to amend by bringing the substitute forward. Colleagues, this incorporates the comments and feedback that council members have provided to Ms. Kempson Wright up to this point, with the exception of a couple that we'll talk about once the substitute is before us. So can I get a second on my motion, please? Seconded by Shook. So motion by Wan, second by Shook to bring forward the substitute. Let's open the vote, please.
Vote is open. The vote is closed. The substitute is before you.
All right, 6 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries. So as I was saying, Ms. Kempson Wright did receive, per her request, a number of communications from other council members. She also received one from Council Member Hillis since this has been prepared. So I'm going to ask her to, if you will, sound those. I'll open it up for comments, but I think from this point on, we probably should just move this forward with no recommendation to full council. I do think there's some more council members who expressed interest in adding. So let's take it in that sequence. So Ms. Kempson Wright, just Mr. Hillis's, because that's the one that's not incorporated in this, right? Yeah.
Additional items included incorporate all items currently in solid waste services fees into the general fund except direct trash, recycling and yard waste collections and items directly related to those. Bring the staged Atlanta Fire Rescue Department salary increases in line to achieve the Mercer Option 1 recommendation and increase salaries for frontline workers in the Departments of Public Works, Parks and Recreation, Atlanta Department of Transportation, and Department of Watershed Management.
Thank you. I'll make two comments and I'll open up for comments or questions from my colleagues. First one is as we receive additional feedback, what I'll do is I will work with Ms. Kempson Wright to kind of bucket them, organize them so that they are kind of similar ones or grouped together, or if they're duplicate ones, we won't see them. So I'll pledge to work with her on that. The second is I would just also encourage council members just to remember that there are two pieces of this. One is to me is trying to capture broad stroke policy, departmental type goals and objectives and priorities. Then we get into more specific and granular projects in the budget process itself. So, like I might want to fund a specific park project in my district, but the strategy here should be to have a goal or objective or priority in general for parks that would then apply, hopefully across the city, and cover, when it comes to budget time, that particular project, if it hasn't already been included. So I just, that's always been my approach to this, and I'm hoping we can still stay with this. So I will now open it up for any other questions or feedback, commentary from my colleagues. Mr. Shook.
And forgive me if it's been sent out and I just have not seen it, but is there the list as currently constituted?
Yeah, that's actually in the packet, in your amendment packet today. And I can make sure Ms. Kempson-Wright incorporates Mr. Hillis's in and resends it back out again.
Oh, it's right here. Okay, thank you.
That's all you got? Yeah. Okay, all right, thanks. Any other questions or comments from my colleagues? Mr. Dozier.
Just point of clarification, for any additions or amendments, they need to be submitted by Monday, is that correct?
I would ask by Friday if you can. That'll give me and Ms. Kempson-Wright some time to kind of group them and be ready for the substitute to Monday. Because, yeah, ideally we'd like to circulate the substitute in advance of Monday's meeting.
Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Bond, yes.
To piggyback on our previous conversation, the projects that were discussed today, it's my intention to add them.
All right, President Shipman.
Thank you. I just wanted to take the opportunity today. I know this is still in process, but there are a couple of big themes that I heard throughout the campaign and that have continued to come up from constituents that I just wanted to highlight for my colleagues from my perspective. One is that there have been a lot of folks who have talked about identifying new streams of revenue or dedicated streams of revenue for key priorities. Some of those include that consistently come up in my conversations: arts, parks, maintenance, transportation. And so I hope that we will consider, as we go through this process, trying to identify streams of revenue to support those. The other is the general notion of more closely matching sources and uses of public funds. I think that it's a philosophical debate that is worth having. More closely matching sources and uses of funds, specifically dedicating part or all of certain fees to support certain parts of government, can increase trust, it can increase transparency, it can also lead to better outcomes in some areas. And so I think that is particularly at this moment, that is something on a broad basis that I hope will be a key part of the overall priority set. And then finally, I think just the reality of the labor market. The labor market is extremely competitive, public and private, and trying to really think about how we are structuring salaries, benefits, bonuses, incentives for education. There's been a lot of talk about this within our public safety forces, but I think more broadly we have to be very cognizant of the labor market pressures, and that was related to some of my questions earlier about our expectations going forward and how personnel and how we compensate personnel is going to be impacted in the years to come. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, President Shipman. Points received and well taken. Other comments? All right, I'll go ahead and put forward a motion to move forward on substitute with no recommendation. Yeah, Mr. Dozier?
Second.
Seconded by Dozier. If there's no further discussion, let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. Vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. That motion carries. This will move forward with no recommendation. And colleagues, just a reminder, and Ms. Kempson-Wright, if we can send a reminder to the rest of council as well, to get your input by Friday, close of business. Okay, the next item is 22-R3335, a resolution by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute a special procurement agreement with New South Synergy, a joint venture pursuant to Section 2-1191.1 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances in an amount not to exceed $55 million. All services will be charged to and paid from PTAEO FDOA as listed herein and for other purposes. Colleagues, we need to amend this to attach the iPro report. I'll make the motion to amend. Can I get a second on that, please? Second by Shook. Any discussion? Seeing none, let's open the vote to amend, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
All right, 6 yeas, 0 nays. The amended paper is before us. So please tell us about the paper.
Good afternoon. Michael Smith, Deputy General Manager, Department of Aviation. This would allow us to enter into a special procurement agreement with New South Synergy for the modernization of our baggage screening system areas at the main security checkpoint. We will be modernizing those units. If you've been to the South Security Checkpoint, you'll notice what look like CT machines that are in medical facilities that is simply similar to what we have there. And this will allow us to install that equipment across the 19 security lanes that we have at the main security checkpoint. Of the $55 million, about $31 million of that is for the equipment. Special procurement because TSA requires us to have specialized equipment that is certified by TSA. And this company is the only company that has installed and completed a certification by TSA for such equipment. And so we would ask for approval of this agreement.
All right, questions, comments, or discussion from my colleagues? There's a motion from Shook to approve as amended, seconded by Dozier. Any further discussion on that? Seeing none, let's go ahead and open the vote, please.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. This item is approved on substitute. While you're standing there, let's go ahead and take the item on held. That is are you speaking to that as well?
Yes,
item number 34, 22-R3202. A resolution by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute an agreement in response to the special procurement number listed pursuant to Section 2-1191.1 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances with designer Gary Lee Super Design Associates in an amount not to exceed $3.5 million for the purpose of designing, fabricating, transporting, and installing a permanent exhibition on the history of the Atlanta Airport in the Transportation Mall between concourses D and E at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. All services will be charged to and paid from account numbers listed herein and for other purposes. Colleagues, we had held this for the iPro paper report, which has caught up. So I'll go ahead and make a motion to amend to add the report, seconded by Shook. Any discussion on the motion to amend? Seeing none, let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The amendment is before you.
All right, Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The airport has over 1,000 pieces of artwork, including things such as the Zimbabwe exhibit, which you may see in the Concourse T through A, the flight paths artwork that goes from Concourse A to B, and we're looking to install a airport history exhibit in the concourse from D to E. Some time ago, council members requested or looked at recognizing certain individuals that have contributed to the airport and aviation in Atlanta. And at that time, the general manager indicated that we were looking at doing something to really bolster the history of the airport. We've selected Mr. Super. He is uniquely qualified. He has prepared certain exhibits, such as the Good Trouble exhibit for the late Congressman John Lewis. He's done the military wall. He's also done the Atlanta History Walk that you see from in the concourse from B to C. So we were asking for approval of the amount of $3.5, not to exceed that amount. And this would be a museum quality exhibit featuring tapes and certain other interactive components to it.
All right, questions for Mr. Smith or aviation on this? Motion from Shook to approve is amended. Is there a second? Seconded by Winston. So if there's no further discussion, let's open that vote, please.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. I was chuckling because I didn't realize the designer's last name was Super. I thought it was Gary Lee and he had just Super Designs. Learn something new every day. All right, next item is 22-R3336, resolution by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute special procurement agreement SPS 12-20-226 Excella Land Management Remote Application Hosting and Maintenance with Excella Inc. on behalf of the Department of City Planning pursuant to Section 2-1191.1 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances for a term of 1 year effective April 1, 2022 through March 31, 2023 with one-year renewal option in an amount not to exceed $529,987.93. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account number listed herein and for other purposes. Please speak to the paper.
Good afternoon, council members. Gregory Pace, Department of City Planning, Office of Buildings Director. Excella is our software application for permitting, licensing, and inspections. It supports the Department of City Planning, Department of Watershed Management, as well as APD Code Enforcement. The contract for this software ends March 31st at the end of this month, and we're needing it so that there's no disruption in service to our customers in order to continue to provide service. So this new agreement will be for 12 months with an additional 1-year option.
All right, thank you, Mr. Pace. Questions or comments from my colleagues? Motion from Shook to approve. Is there a second? Seconded by Winston. If there's no further discussion, let's open the vote, please.
Vote is open. Vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Pace. Next, all right, that takes us to K, dual referred items. The first one, 22-01176. I understand CDHS was held this paper. It continues to be held, so we do not need to take action, correct?
Correct. Items 23 and 24 remain held in their committees.
Thank you. Okay, so that takes us to item 22-R-3257, a resolution by Councilmember Michael Julian Bond requesting the Chief Procurement Officer work with the Departments of Aviation and Enterprise Asset Management to review and provide a report on the allocation of task orders issued for FC 10640, Job Order Contracting Services, Large, and FC 1190033, Managing General Contractor Services at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, and for other purposes. This came out of transportation this morning favorably, and so it is now before us. Mr. Bond, do you want to speak to this or make the motion?
Move approval.
All right. So motion from Mr. Bond to approve, seconded by Shook. I know you said that y'all were prepared to comply during transportation, correct?
Indeed, we still stand by that, yes.
All right. Thank you. If there's no further discussion, let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. Thank you. All right, papers held in committee. The first one is 27, which is 22-1091, a substitute ordinance by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the Chief Financial Officer on behalf of the Department of Transportation to transfer and deposit funds generated from fees associated with abandonments, encroachments, and right-of-way dining to the Encroachment and Abandonment Fund project number listed and for other purposes. The department has asked that we file this, or the administration is asking that we file this. So I'll make that motion, seconded by Shook. If there's no discussion, let's open that vote to file, please.
Vote is open. Will everyone please vote? Councilmember Bond? The vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, motion carries. That paper will be filed. Mr. Bond, did you want to go ahead and take 31 and 32 to file those as well now at this point?
Yes, but I won't make that motion.
All right, 22-01180, an ordinance by Councilmember Michael Julian Bond authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to allocate funds for a new pedestal for the Martin Luther King Jr. statue located at the intersection of Northside Drive and Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, Georgia State Capitol, from the 2022 infrastructure bonds for horizontal projects, council discretionary account, and for other purposes, and 22-0-1181, an ordinance by Councilmember Michael Julian Bond authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to allocate funds for the Vietnam Veterans Memorial in Piedmont Park from the 2022 infrastructure bonds for horizontal projects, council discretionary account, and for other purposes. Mr. Bond has made a motion to file both papers. I'm sorry?
Someone else make the motion. I don't scratch my own work.
All right, I'll make the motion to file then. Is there a second? Seconded by Winston. Respect that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's open the vote, please.
Vote is open. Vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays, 1 abstention. The motion carries. These papers will be filed. All right. Yeah, I've not seen the refund paper in my substitutes, though. Colleagues, there should be a substitute for item number 33. Here it is. Sorry about that. A resolution by Councilmember Alex Wan authorizing, as substituted by Finance Executive Committee, authorizing the Chief Financial Officer to refund customers for overpayments to water and sewer accounts in an amount of $46,249.88, all funds to be charged to and paid from fund, department, organization, and account numbers listed and for other purposes. I'll make a motion to amend by bringing forward the substitute, seconded by Shook. If there's no discussion, let's open that vote, please.
Vote is open. The vote is closed.
5 yeas, 0 nays. Motion carries. The substitute is before us. There are 2 accounts. You see the details listed here. Gotcha. If there are no questions, I'll make a motion to approve on substitute, seconded by Shook. Seeing no further discussion, let's open that vote, please.
The vote is open. Vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays. The motion carries. Thank you. All right, we have one walk-in paper. All right, this is ELMS 29209, a resolution by Finance Executive Committee authorizing the mayor or his designee to execute sole source agreement number listed Pioneer Technology Benchmark Maintenance and Support with Pioneer Technology Group, LLC, pursuant to Section 2-1191 of the City of Atlanta Code of Ordinances on behalf of the Municipal Court of Atlanta for a term of 1 year with 3 one-year renewal options in an amount not to exceed $293,550.00. All contracted work will be charged to and paid from the fund, department, organization, and account numbers listed herein. If you'll speak to the paper and also just explain why the urgency and why we need to walk this in today, please.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. Rashida Davis, Court Administrator and Chief Clerk of Court for the Municipal Court of Atlanta. We are requesting authorization to enter into a maintenance and support agreement with our current vendor, Pioneer Technology Group. They are the sole proprietor of our case management system. This houses all of our citation data, records, dispositions, anything that's associated with our case. This vendor is the sole proprietor of our software, and we cannot contract with anyone else. So we are here to ensure that there is not a lapse in our coverage. Our current contract for maintenance and support expires in April.
Yeah, and colleagues, just reminded that with recess, it would have pushed us, and it would have created a lapse in time and coverage. So that's why I permitted it to come in as a walk-in today.
Thank you.
All right, I'll make the motion, as seconded by Shook. Mr. Dozier, do you have a question about this? Yeah, please, go ahead.
Sorry if I missed this in your explanation, but what does this software do again?
This is our case management system. It houses all of our data, the citations, the dispositions, motions, filings, literally millions of documents, every citation we receive, and we receive like 200,000 each year. So it is a huge system. We utilize it as well as the solicitor's office and public defenders. And this is also displays public information on our website, so you can research your case.
All right, there's a motion from Juan, second by Shook. Any other questions on this? legislation? All right, seeing none, let's open that vote, please.
Vote is open. Vote is closed.
6 yeas, 0 nays, the motion carries. Thank you. And colleagues, I do appreciate your accommodation of that walk-in paper. All right, that, I believe, concludes all of our legislative items. Colleagues, any announcements, any comments or additional information for the good of the order? All right, if not, we stand adjourned. Thank you very, very much.